over me. She caught me with her hypnotic dance. She holds me here with only a glance. She's over me. She's over me. And good evening, everybody. Hope you're having a great night. Thank you for coming in. This is the Paranormal Portal, Bedtime Stories from Beyond, and I hope you're having a great evening. And thanks for spending part of it with me, because I'd feel just really silly doing this all by myself, but I don't have to because you guys are piling in. Thank you so much, everybody, for showing up. I always sit here and just smiling because at the beginning of every show, of course, is all these greetings, and it's all of you guys that have created this community here, and it just makes me so amazed at what you guys have built, and it's really pretty amazing. So I just think it's wonderful. It's just humbling is what it is, ladies and gentlemen. Just humbling. All right, let me find where the hell I'm at here. Here we go. I just had to find my stories, but I found them. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, of course, as this is the Paranormal Portal, the call-in board is always open here on the portal. We enjoy your company. And feel free to call in if you'd like, 720-923-0500. And you can be a part of tonight's show if you like. But I got a bunch of stories pulled up for you, and I'm all ready to go. So I hope you guys are all ready to go, because it's time for bed. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are now underway officially. So get yourself all snuggled in and cozied up, and hope you got a beverage and use the loo, because it's time for your stories. And I hope I've got some good ones pulled up for you guys, but time will tell, of course. So let's see what I got here. And the first one tonight, let's have some fun. Absolutely, Durango. Durango 9/11. Have some fun. I suppose I could say hello to everybody that's in here. Quite a few of you are piling in, which is really cool, but it doesn't look like I have a complete list at all. But I'll read what my list says. Aussie Tiger Rock Fam is in here. Deborah Varner's in here. Durango 9/11. It's What You Make It. Ken Christensen is in here. Lewis is in here. Michael Holtz, I'm in here. Rand Electric is in here. Renee Harvey, Renee Cruz, Rivers, Tammy White, and Virginia. So great to see you all. Now let me see how poorly that list represented who's here. It looks like everybody that's chatting has been represented. Maybe it was complete. So good to see everybody, though. Thank you so much. Suzanne Lucero, or is it Lucero or Lucero? Lucero O'Brien is in here, and I didn't see her name before. And Ken, good to see you, Ken. By the way, all my Aussie brothers, you guys got to represent down there. I'm looking at the podcast numbers, and Australia is kind of showing up kind of weak. It's like, wait a minute. I know I got listeners in Australia. I've got a few of you. No, there's a few hits in Australia, so I'm assuming that's you guys. But if it's not, then help a brother out, will you? The Wednesday podcast is dropping tomorrow, and this is part one of two parts of an interview we did with Jim Mount, and he is a UFO contactee, a lifelong contactee, and just an amazing experience that he has to share. He gets into a lot of the exopolitics with all these different races visiting the Earth and what's going on and who's in charge, who's not in charge, who's being rogue and all of that. And he even goes on throughout the course of this interview to break down the color of these orbs that people see, these UFO orbs. Now, UFO orbs are a pretty common UFO sighting all around the world, but believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, there's a reason that they're colored the way they're colored. And you'll have to check out that podcast to find out what those colors mean, but I find it incredibly interesting, and it still kind of rocks my boat. I don't have them all memorized, but I know a few of the colors now, and I think it's pretty cool to kind of have an indication of what they're doing, what's going on, and you can tell what they're up to by the color of their craft. So I thought that was incredibly interesting, and I hope you guys enjoy that as well. But that'll be launching as of midnight tonight on our podcast. So wherever you get your podcast from, you can get that episode, and I hope you enjoy it. It's part one of two, so there's two. Next Wednesday, again, there will be part two will be up for that, and that'll be the whole 2-part episode. So, all right, so the first story tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is coming out of Michigan. Oh, that sounds like a creepy one. Not incredibly long, but it still sounds like a creepy one. I thought there was something else I wanted to mention too, but I'm not remembering it. So I guess if it's important, it'll come to me, right? We'll just go with that. But if that was the case, I'd be remembering a lot more, because I always remember like later. It's like, oh, I should have said this. But anyway, it's the story of my life. I should probably take notes, really, but that would require more organization than I currently possess. So out of Michigan, when I was 3, my parents bought their first house, and I'm now 37 and have a house and family of my very own. The first encounter I can recall is when my brother was born, and I was 5 at the time, and we shared a bedroom, and my mom had to come into the room in the middle of the night and check on him, and I saw an elderly woman standing next to the crib. We would experience this woman on many occasions after that, and we did know an elderly woman was a previous owner, but that was all we had. When I was 8, my parents had a large addition put onto the home, and after that, it wasn't only bedroom sightings, but kitchen and dining room, though never anything in the new areas of the home. See, that's interesting. I find that very interesting. Years later, when I was in my early 20s, my husband and son came to the home for the first time for a week-long visit. And at this point, I had never told my husband about any of the sightings. And one day, during our visit, we left my husband at the house while everyone else was shopping. And mind you, this was in the middle of the day. When we returned, he was outside sitting on the porch. He took me into the bedroom and he told me what had happened. First, he explained that he was watching television in the older part of the home and the television turned off. He turned it back on and it happened again. And when he went to turn it on the second time, he heard something banging on the outer wall of the home next to the TV. He wrote that off as possibly an animal or something, and once the TV was back on, he heard what sounded like serial people. I think they mean several people walking in from the back door into the kitchen, and cupboard doors opening and closing. And he yelled at that point, "You're all back already?" But nobody answered, and everything went quiet. By this point, he had had enough and went outside to wait for us to return. I sat him down and told him of the activity in the home, and also told him I would be waking up in the middle of the night, and when this happened, to looking in a certain corner of the bedroom and not say a word. A couple of nights later, I woke him up, and he did as I had told him, and after a couple of moments, she was gone. I told him I would describe what he had seen. A woman in her 70s, about 4'7", a dark nightgown, dark gray hair, in a loose bun. His mouth fell open. I had just described what he had seen, and he was without words. Since that time, many things still occur, and we occasionally hear stories of lamps turning on by themselves and other noises. Now, the interesting thing about that story, again, is the part where, even though they added on to the house, for some reason or another, the spirits don't seem to either want to or able to enter that part. So all of the activity is still happening in the old part of the house. And I find that really curious and interesting. So is it because they don't want to, or is it because they just can't? Are they only able to walk in areas that they walked during their lifetime? That's kind of curious. That's kind of curious indeed. It's got me thinking, ladies and gentlemen. Not sure what that means exactly, but it is a neat little tidbit. And that's what I mean about reading paranormal stories and hearing your guys' accounts, is little pieces of the puzzle come in. Just like that. Like that would be one of my puzzle pieces. Like, well, why is that? Why can't they just go into the new part? Are they not able to move around quite as freely as we are? Is it because that part of the house didn't exist in their lifetime that they cannot enter it? And I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but it seems very curious that all of the new edition parts have no activity at all. Interesting. But then again, you have brand new constructions that experience hauntings. So is there something attached to the land in those kind of situations? I don't know. See, this is how my mind works. I don't know. It's kind of busy in here, let me tell you. All right, so let's see what's going on next. And we're going to Virginia. Virginia for Virginia. We got a listener named Virginia. Well, we're going to the state of Virginia. And this one's not real long either. All right. In October of 2007, our family held the funeral of my sister Noi. After the regular prayer, the Buddhist ceremony followed, and just a handful of people left. I was amazed at the amount of people that wanted to stay for the ceremony. And I'm not sure if any of you understand or have knowledge of Buddhism. Well, my family is Buddhist, but of course we are open to other religions. My mom is very close to the Laos temple in Catlet, Virginia. Wat Laos, Budavong. And there were live monks at the funeral, and they chanted. They lined up each family member in front of the casket, and each of us had a robe in our hands. And in the robe there were flowers, candles, our name, and cash. And we laid them on top of my sister because she was going to be cremated with it. The meaning of these items is to provide her with them for her journey. Once the strings and flowers were cut away, it is releasing her spirits and allowing her to go. After the ceremony, the monks followed my parents to their house, along with our friends and other family members, and I followed my oldest sister and her friends to her house because we also had people over. That night, I had the most sad, scary, yet vivid dream. This is the first time Noi's face appeared since she passed away on October 4th. In my dream, she had blonde hair with red streaks. I really couldn't figure out why. Well, Noi and I were at my parents' house, and she was packing all of her things, and I asked her where she was going, and she said, "I'm moving out, Joy. I found a really nice barn garage apartment right behind Mom and Dad's work. It's perfect because I can display all of my artwork like my own little gallery, and it will only cost me pennies." I said, pennies? Wow, that is cheap. I cried, and then she grabbed her things, and she told me she loved me and that everything will be okay. And then she disappears. The next morning, we had a family gathering at my parents' house. It was just the family this time, and for a whole week before her funeral, my parents had all of their friends, our family members, and monks to have private prayers for Noi. When I arrived at their house, I noticed a bunch of white string covering the whole house and around the backyard. And while we were eating outside, I told my family about the dream I had. My sister Janet told me that Noi had blonde hair with red streaks because her best friend Masha has that same hair color. My mom said the reason why Noi was moving out in my dream is because her spirit is no longer allowed to return to the house. This is why the strings were covering the house and yard. It is to keep her away and remind her that she has to go on with her journey. I didn't even have to ask anyone about the pennies. I then remembered the monks putting aluminum foiled pennies inside her box before we cremated her. I have attached a YouTube slide. It doesn't work. There's nothing here. And it contains her sister's artwork. But it's not here, so there's nothing to show, unfortunately. And I don't have permission to show it. So anyway, but cool. Now that is interesting. And I never knew all of those intricacies of a Buddhist funeral. And I find that incredibly interesting. I find it kind of sad, though, the string, to keep them out. Like, no, you're not to come here. But I guess it is a journey, right? Life is a journey. And if spirits are lingering, then they're not doing their journey. I don't know. That's incredibly interesting. Excuse me. Let's see. This one is from North Carolina. A couple of years ago, I worked briefly at a bed and breakfast in town, and the inn was an old mansion from back around the time the town was first settled. The place was, of course, creepy, just in that it was so old and had too many little nooks and corners, and there were the old passageways for the maids to get to the rooms without going through the main halls, but I was never brave enough to go down them, and the cellar was enough of a stretch for me. While I worked there, I was dating the manager, and one night we decided to stay at the inn, and we had a few guests at the time, and on this night, the place was absolutely empty. And there was a reservation in place, but they hadn't shown up yet to claim their room by the time we retire for the night, so we just left a note on the door telling them where the room was, and we stayed in room 2, which is on the second floor at the end of the hallway, across from the Bachelor Suite. A couple of the rooms were named suites, as they were especially ornate and larger than the regular rooms. The Bachelor Suite hadn't been rented out in a while. I had been there as it had been undergoing some renovations that were basically done by this point. We went to the bed probably a little after 11, but woke up within a few hours to what sounded like at least 2 people coming down the hall with their luggage. Our door was closed, of course, but we both sat up a little and listened to them pause outside the Bachelor Suite and open the door and go in. Once things had quieted down and it seemed that the guests were all settled in and all was well, we went back to sleep, not wanting to disturb them after their trip and late arrival. The next morning we got up to prepare the breakfast, only to find that everything as we had left it downstairs and no guests to feed, nor any trace that anyone had been in that room at all. The ghost guests. Well, that's kind of a classical haunting, I guess. Next one is from Washington. Oh, come on, don't do that. I don't know, relating to the first one. Okay. So this happened when I was about 16, and there was a clock in the kitchen above the sink and is dead center on the back wall of the kitchen. The clock has a glass door covering the face, and it has a latch to keep it closed. And every member of my family had experiences where the door to the face of the clock would open on its own. My younger sister, who was never bothered by this spirit, was actually doing the dishes one evening and witnessed the door opening right before her eyes. This being her first real experience freaked her out so bad that she couldn't finish the dishes and refused to go back into the kitchen for the rest of that night. This had been happening for quite some time, and yet I was the only one who ever saw this happen. Finally, one evening, I was sitting in the dining room area and to the right of the kitchen and ironically coloring a picture of the lady and death in this medieval coloring book that I had. And I remember glancing up at the clock and thinking, with all the other things that had been happening to me, why hadn't I seen the door open? I finished my coloring and got up to go to the bedroom. And as soon as I set foot in the kitchen, I just happened to look up at the clock, and right as it was torn off the wall before my eyes, and it came down forcefully with a loud crash, falling flat on its bottom and into the dish rack, flinging forks and knives across the kitchen, which landed at my feet. As this happened, I swear I heard a faint growl and a huge burst of energy forced in my direction. I was so scared. I wanted to run out of the house and halfway up the block, and instead, I ran into the couch in the living room and fell on my older sister's lap. She asked me, "What the hell did you do?" And I tried to explain to her that I didn't do anything. She tried to tell me that I needed to go clean up my mess, but I was too afraid to go back into that kitchen and kept repeating that I didn't do it. A couple of hours later, when my dad got home, I explained what had happened, and he went into the kitchen and retrieved the clock that was still sitting on the back of the sink. As he examined it, we noticed that the nails that held the clock in place on the wall were still intact, but they were bent downward. There were also grooves in the wood on the back of the clock from the nails. He commented how it really did look like someone just came up and ripped it off the wall. The clock was very secure on the wall, and it would have taken an earthquake to make it fall in the first place. My dad permanently glued the door shut so it couldn't be opened and replaced the nails on the wall, and we made sure that it was very secure this time. He claimed later on that he was up late one evening and he could hear the door jiggling, like someone was trying to open it once again. I haven't witnessed any other encounters with the clock in the kitchen, though it still gives me a really eerie feeling when I go in there. Other clocks in the house, such as the alarm clocks, would sound off on their own in the middle of the day or sometimes even in the evening while the whole family was eating at the dinner table. Time seems important to this being, and I'm trying to figure out what it all means. Until next time. Ooh, play on words. Clever. That was a clever close. Got to give him some props for that. Oh, you know what? Good question. Because I didn't turn it on? Because I forgot? Formalities. I knew I was missing something. Thank you, Aussie Tiger. Yeah, I tend to forget some things sometimes, but I appreciate reminders. Anytime you see something that's not going the way it should be, just do what you did, and I'll see it eventually. Senior moment. My whole life is a senior moment, Jess. Oh my God. There it is. It's lit. Just like me. No, I'm just kidding. I'm completely sober. No chemicals to blame for this one, ladies and gentlemen. This is all me. All right, the next one's from Massachusetts, and this one's really pretty quick. It seems that sensitivity runs in my family, and I've always felt presences and even had some experiences, but I'll save some of those for another time. This is about my son's experience with a spirit. We moved into our home about a year ago, and everything seemed really pretty quiet. I sensed something was there, but not in a harmful way. Well, one night about 3 weeks ago, I was walking through our house, just making sure all the lights were off before going to bed myself, and as I was approaching my son's room, I could hear him talking to someone. He was actually having a conversation with someone. I asked him, "Who are you talking to?" And he replied, "My new friend." So I asked him about his new friend, and he told me his friend's name was John and that he used to live here before we moved in. And I said, "Okay." And I told him to get some sleep. I went to my room and asked my fiance if he ever told our son the name of the gentleman that lived here before we did. And he said, "No, why?" So I told him what happened. You see, John was the name of the man that lived in the house for a long time and passed away in the bathroom a little over 2 years ago. And we live across the street from the cemetery where he was buried. I thought this was so cool, I had to share it with you. And I would be more than happy for some input. Ghost fam, you got it, Renee. That's exactly right. I don't know. That's a cool story. Again, it doesn't sound like John's causing any trouble. But I'd keep a close eye on that one all the same, because when it's a kid, it's kind of the same thing. Like, if your kid is talking to a ghost, okay, good. But I still think you got to watch it closely, because it's kind of like your kid talking on the internet. You don't know who they're talking to. They don't know who they're talking to. And it's probably good to supervise that kind of stuff just to be sure. You don't want your kid, spending time talking to somebody that might try to abduct them or something creepy. So, and again, the same thing could be true for spirits. Not that you should discourage the communication. If it's a gift, it's a gift, but maybe help educate them on how to detect bad spirits or something. I don't know. Just saying, I'd be keeping a close eye on that one. All right, next one is from New Jersey. Not too long. This one's pretty quick. How long is the next one? I got to look ahead a little bit. No, that one's pretty quick too. Pretty quick story night. I went through so many of those really long stories, and it's kind of nice to get these quick ones now. We can cover more material, really. My uncle was one of my best babysitters as I grew up older and older, and me and my cousin Georgette grew fond of him, and even when we had friends over, we enjoyed his company. And Uncle Lopez always bought me clothes, jewelry, and gave me money when I didn't even need it. We lived in a 2-family house, and our family on the bottom and him on the top, and our house was being sold, so we both had to take our separate ways, and since then, I thought I would never see him again. He moved to Las Vegas with my cousins before him, or because him and my father were having problems, and I never knew why. The next day, I had received a phone call from my aunts. My Uncle Lopez had passed away, and they didn't know the reason why. They had told me that he went to sleep, and the next day he died. His heart wasn't beating. He was gone. I hung up and told my parents the news and started to cry. Was he really gone? I started having dreams about him for about a week, and for some reason, they were always the same thing. We were in a mall together, laughing and smiling, and he was carrying my mom's cell phone. Months later, I hadn't been too sad as I was before about the death, because truly I had to move on, and it was coming close to September, so unfortunately I had to go to school shopping again, and me and my mom hit the mall to have those mother-daughter days. When we were done shopping, before we walked out of the mall, her cell phone rang, and when I looked at the screen, it said Uncle Lopez. I was confused, and I told my mom, "Didn't Auntie throw Uncle Lopez's cell phone away?" She nodded, and I saw my mom wasn't the only one frightened. She told me to call back, and as I dialed his numbers, my fingers were shaking with fear. And when I called, someone picked up, and all I heard were the noises of static and a bit of a voice. I just couldn't understand what he was saying. Finally, I noticed that me in a mall with my mom's cell phone reminded me of my dream. That's really powerful. That's a cool story. I do like those stories. I think that's really cool. Very, very profound. This one's coming out of Illinois. My boyfriend lives in the basement of his grandparents' house, and they would always tell me stories of a ghost down there. And it always included someone yelling their name And when they went to check it out, see who it was, nobody would be around. And I never experienced any of this the numerous times I'd stayed there. But about 2 weeks ago, I came home from school to visit him, and he gets up for work very early in every morning at around 3:45 and leaves at around 5:15. And normally I will just sleep in and go home later in the morning. And one morning at around 5:30 after he left, I laid in bed and fell back asleep, and I was awoken and was being shook. I felt as though someone had a hold of me and was shaking me. I couldn't move. I just laid there, and I felt this weird presence over me. Then I looked to my right, to the side of the bed, and there was this thing I felt standing there. All I could see was two blurry white shapes as if they were eyes. Just stared, and I couldn't move. I just kept telling myself that it was just a dream and nothing was happening. And then once I was able to look away, everything let go. I freaked out and tried to go back to bed. I freaked out and tried to go back to bed. Oh, I don't know how you do that. After being unsuccessful, I went home, and I have never slept in that basement since. Am I crazy? I asked his whole family, about what they had experienced in the past and if this was in any way related, and they all thought I was dreaming and said never before had anything like that happened. It felt very mean to me, like it wanted me out of the bed and like it didn't want me there. It just has this mean stare that is like infused into my brain. After that, my boyfriend Mike says that more weird things happened. Lately, he said that he will throw his comforter on the ground in the morning before he leaves for work, and when he gets back, his bed is made. That's a good ghost. That's a really good ghost. That's an awesome presence. He has asked his family members if they've been doing this, and everyone says no. What's going on in this basement? His grandparents were the first ones to live in this house, and they've lived there for about 40 years, and things always happen in the basement. They live in Rock Falls, Illinois. So there's that, ladies and gentlemen. That's just a little bit of creepiness. So we're doing good. I can pull up a few more stories. We got time. We got all kinds of time. We've only been at this about 33 minutes. So plenty of time for more of this ghost story stuff. Hope you guys are enjoying it. I love these stories. I really do. I think they're awesome. I don't know if I got to look at some of these though. See how big. This one's short. This one's pretty short. This one is a little bit longer, but not too bad. And short. And one last one. Ooh, this one's long. So the last one I'll be reading tomorrow, or I guess tomorrow night is the Mayhem Night, isn't it? Wednesday, 2-hour night. So I guess I'll read a few of these. But one of them's going to have to wait till tomorrow. Just too much material to cover. This one's coming out of New Jersey. And it was late one night that when it happened to me, I was freakishly terrified. It was a really long day and I was tired. My sister had turned off the lights and went to bed, and we share a bed, so I slept next to her. And for some reason, I couldn't go to sleep. And yeah, I'm afraid of the dark. I put the covers over me, though, and it was burning hot, and my heart was racing, and I didn't want to hear anything creepy nor see anything. I kept quiet, and I just laid there, and I couldn't take it anymore, so I started to turn on my other side until I paused. I couldn't move. I couldn't say anything. I gasped for breath and tried to move my feet and fingers, and I was completely paralyzed. I opened my eyes and saw this huge black figure standing before me. I blinked a couple of times, so I couldn't really make out the details, and I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I tightly closed my eyes as cold chills went down my spine, and I could feel it. Tears coming out of my eyes. I was so scared. I didn't know what to do. But then I quickly turned, almost smacking my arm on my sister, but luckily I stopped in time. I looked over to see the figure had turned purplish bluish, and then it disappeared. I wiped my tears and woke up my sister. Believe it or not, but this is based on something that did happen. What's based on it? What are you, a narrator or a novelist? I don't know for sure, but I believe it was trying to make me go to sleep. What do you base it on? It's either true or it's not true. You know, if it's fabricated, if you embellished, I don't know. I based it on a true story. There's that, ladies and gentlemen, but we're going to New York this time. This is interesting. When I was little, about 2 years old or so, and still small enough to be in a crib, my mom and I lived in an apartment in a house that had been converted to a 4-family home. This house was on Church Street in the small city of Little Falls. I used to tell my mom the black man was there to see me. Little Falls is a very small community, and in the early 70s, there were no black people at all. And I'd never seen a black person in my entire life. Despite the fact I was so young, I can still see this man in my mind, and on a recent occasion spoke of this with my mom and fully detailed the layout of the apartment to her. We only lived there for about 6 months, and the day we moved out, my mom found a crucifix on the bookcase. She never owned one, and there was no excuse for it to be there. Years later, we learned that this house had a history of being an underground railroad in the 1800s. Several years later, when my son was about the same age I was when I had my black man experiences, he began to talk about the black man who would come to see him. He also had never seen a black person in his life, and I wonder if it was the same black man or just a coincidence. My son also claimed to see an old lady going up the stairs in a home we bought around the time he was 12 years old. 6 months later, we discovered the old lady who owned the house. 2 owners prior to us had died in the house and had lied there for 3 days dead before being discovered. Ooh, that's just not good. The human body is not good without a pulse. Occasionally, I would hear little noises that could only be described as tiny sneezes when no one else was in the room. The house was very old, and my husband and I were trying to restore it, and whenever a man other than my husband would try to do repairs to the house, he would end up getting hurt. My husband and sons were the only males who could work on the house without getting hurt, and it was at that point we decided to do all the work ourselves. My son never saw the lady again, but I never heard the sneezes again after that. She must have been happy with our work. Wow, that's pretty intense. Okay, so this one's coming out of New Jersey. Oh, man. Ugh. I just ate before the show, and it's going sideways. It's going sideways in my stomach. Oh, cramp. All right, New Jersey. What? Okay, so it's Alestina Bautista. That was my grandmother's beautiful name. She was someone who I really looked up to even today. She made me realize many things, like learning from my own mistakes and standing up for myself, and she was an outgoing and encouraging woman. Many of my relatives loved her, even though I believed I wasn't her all-time favorite. She was a sweet-hearted woman with a warm smile and a courageous soul. I was about 11 when I started having this awkward dream about my grandmother almost feeling very real. It was very late on April 10th, and I was lying into a mattress with no sheets and covers because my family had just moved in, and my dream had took place in a cemetery on a warm, sunny afternoon. I happened to be in the middle of nowhere in that cemetery, and from my point of view, I saw my grandmother sitting on a gray, fancy-looking bench, smiling. She asked me to take a seat right beside her, and so I did, and she was wearing a white dress mixed with a bit of yellow, and it was beautiful. And she looked beautiful. Her hair was down and wavy, and she was wearing blush, a very red lipstick on her, and on her ring finger, the ring my grandfather had given her for their wedding. You're turning into a very, what? You're turning into a very young lady, you know. And I nodded. I just want to ask you a favor, dear. And what is that? I want to ask you to please take care of your family. I will. Your education. I will. Be kind to others and all those amongst yourselves. I will. And please, 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 never forget me, okay, dear? I felt a bit of a soothing emotion in me and my eyes began to blur. Oh, Grandma, I promise you with all my heart I'll never forget you. I won't. The weather suddenly began changing. Clouds started to form over the blazing hot sun, and my grandmother was disappearing before my eyes, and her body began to float above me and then even higher to the skies. Just remember, dear, I love you. She disappeared within a blink of an eye, and I woke up. The next day, when I finally awoke, my mother announced that my grandmother had passed away not too long ago. It was April 11th, the day of her funeral, and she had passed away at exactly 8 a.m., and I was crying, especially my mother, the daughter of Alestina, and she was truly gone, and it was difficult to believe. And as I arrived closer to her coffin, I froze in a bit of terror. She was wearing the exact same dress in my dream, the same wavy hair, the very red lipstick, and my grandfather's ring on her ring finger. But ever since that night of my dream, I believe that my grandmother was trying to contact me and wishing me the best before she died. Still, I miss her today, aiming for the stars to finally see her again. Oh, that's a beautiful story. That's lovely. Next one is North Carolina. This one's a real quick one, and this will put us, I don't know. Yeah, this will be about the last one. I guess we'll go for about a 45-minute show tonight. I've been giving you hours all week. You got to give me a little break. I've been up since 4 this morning, so I'm wiped out. All right, so let's see what's going on in North Carolina. We just moved to North Carolina, and the house me and my family moved into was built back in the early 1960s. It was back in the woods where a battlefield used to be, and also a graveyard. I was about 9 at the time. Okay. And there was this old fireplace in the living room, and beside it was an old built-in bookshelf with attached books that pulled open into a hideaway room, like a panic room. Me and my family were watching a movie one Saturday night in the living room, but we still had one lamp on, so we could still see each other, and we heard a squeak, and the room from the bookshelf was exposed. I got so scared. My mom told me that it was probably open, and my dog pushed it open even more. Getting ready for school on Sunday, me and my mother were watching TV at around 7 o'clock, and one of the books from the bookshelf came flying across the living room in midair, hit the wall, and dropped. I about peed my pants. We don't know what happened, and ever since then, weird things were happening around the house. One night we had those shades that when you pull them, they roll up because we were in the process of ordering new ones. And one night in my room while I was asleep, they suddenly popped up. And I was taking a bath, and I always shut the door. But when I was drying off, I saw it was locked, which I didn't do. I got locked in the bathroom, and we had to call the landlord because my parents couldn't get me out. I'm 16 years old now, and I still believe in ghosts. Weird things happen to me, and I see things, but thank God we moved into a brand new house. There you have it. That's a collection of pretty good stories tonight, I think. I liked them. I hope you guys enjoyed them. I think they were pretty good. How did we do for time? I'm just curious how we ended up. Yeah, it's about 45 minutes. What did I say, huh? Make sure you guys check out the podcast. It does release tonight at midnight. So tomorrow when you wake up, you can download the part 1 of 2 parts featuring Jim Mount, who is talking about his contact with the aliens and what he's learned. Really an exceptional story and an exceptional experience, and I hope you guys enjoy it. We don't do a lot of UFO stuff on the show because, quite honestly, I mean, I've had sightings. I know they're real, but it's hard to find that, those people that are willing to come on and talk about repeatedly what their knowledge is. And so I've got a few calls out. I'm waiting to get some word back, but hopefully we can get in touch with some of these ringers out there that are dealing with UFO stuff all the time. But I was real pleased that Jim came along and we were able to get him to talk about what he's experienced, because it truly is an exceptional story. And, I believe him. I think he's experienced something pretty amazing. So, but that'll be tomorrow, part 1 of 2 parts. And then the following Wednesday, part 2 will be released. But other than that, if you're not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified when we're online. Find us on Facebook, facebook.com/Paranormal Portal Radio. And you can find us on MeWe. Look for Brent Thomas. I'm there. I got a picture. It looks like me. I don't know what my page is, if they have a name or not. But it's there. So I hope you guys will do that. Find us on Twitter, please, too. We had 71 followers. Now I got 68. I don't know. 2 people got sick of me or something. I don't know. I'm not much of a tweeter, though, and that's the problem. But I'm getting better. I'm sending a few things here and there over to Twitter to try to flex my tweeting muscles. So if you have a Twitter, please find us on Twitter at Paranormal Portal, PORTL. So Paranormal PORTL. And that'll be our page, and I'd love to have you guys follow me there and kind of create more of a presence over there on Twitter. I do release news mostly on our Facebook page, but I also release it on MeWe and Twitter regularly. So if anything's coming up for the show, if you're subscribed to all 3 of those, one of them's bound to catch you, I hope. So, and if you don't have a MeWe, you should get one. It's a pretty good site, and with all of the uncertainty surrounding Facebook and their decision to be thought police as well as social media, I think it's causing a lot of people to look elsewhere, and I think MeWe is the pretty good alternative. We're there, so if you're into it, check it out. But I love you all. Be good, be kind, be nice. Take care of each other. Help each other out. Find the magic in every day. And remember to laugh as much as you can. And Don will be joining me tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll get into some of the mayhem that we do on our 2-hour shows. So love you guys. I hope everything's wonderful, and sweet dreams.